Hey, friends, welcome back to Shift Happens. I am your host and the lead pastor of an open and affirming church here in Gainesville, Florida. My name is Joe Smith, and today I have not a typical guest. Uh, I have somebody with me that is part of an organization called Active Minds, and I'm super excited to welcome DeHaven Mays to the podcast. DeHaven and I connected. Active Minds reached out to our local Pride Community Center and we started talking about their program and what they're doing, and we're actually implementing it in our church. And just had a actually, at this recording, it's like right before Valentine's Day, and had a training with you this morning. So I've seen a ton of you today, but thanks for taking time. I know you got a ton of stuff going on, and you're not feeling so hot probably still, and a lot of sickness. But thank you for jumping on here and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Super excited. Being sick, it always sucks, but this definitely is like a nice little pep in the right direction.
Yeah, I feel that. There's just so much going on right now, so much
Yep.
nastiness all through the air. Well, DeHaven, I know that you're not the typical guest, right? With the typical story, like I mentioned before, most of our guests are coming out of like some church trauma, and that's kind of where it's centered on. Um, but just a little bit of conversation that we had, I found your story still very intriguing, and the fact that you do what you do now. And I really want people to find out about Active Minds. And I'm excited to dive into your story and how it informed and, took you to where you're at. So what did childhood look like for you? Where did you grow up and all of that stuff?
Yeah, so I actually grew up, I moved around a lot. My dad was in the Navy, long retired by the time I came around, but he I think kept like his kind of nomadic brain going. And so I moved around a fair amount as a kid, but I pretty much grew up in Mississippi, in
Mm,
Jackson. So grew up in the deep South. And it's kind of funny, like I never my parents aren't religious. Like my mom always sang and she was always in choirs, but outside of that, I went to church because she sang and that was about it. There wasn't any um
indoctrination.
pressure. Yeah, it was, and we like I grew up Episcopalian, so everyone's just kind of chilling and hanging out, and I don't know, we're drinking this weird wine stuff and some wafers and throwing a cookie, and that was about it, right? It was very chill, but I will say, like, I where I went to school, I went to a private school in Jackson, and although the school at the time was not Christian, it was Christian culture
Mm,
because all of my peers went to very, very large Southern Baptist mega churches. Like they were in a lot of youth groups. They wore t-shirts that said like Jesus is my homeboy with Jesus on a motorcycle, right? Like I remember these images so vividly. Haven't thought about them in years. And so I think I grew up in Christian culture,
mhm.
even though it was a school and it was my everyday life. But when I look back, I was in like the heart of heteronormative white supremacy Christian culture. And yeah, I mean, I would say for me, like I didn't come out, I identify as non-binary, and I didn't come out as non-binary until I was 26. And I think it was because of especially my elementary years growing up in that private school in Christian culture where I, was bullied and harassed by teachers and was called it because I wore like basketball shorts and a t-shirt. And it was just like
You
no one knew where to put me.
you got called it?
Yeah. I
Like,
remember I remember vividly I was like playing and a teacher who I didn't know, but I remember the teacher pointed at one of my friends and pointed at me and said, "What is that? Like what is it? Like I don't know how to peg this kid." And I was just like, "Oh, well that does not feel very good." So, I learned quickly how to dress and essentially just assimilate into
yeah.
this culture. And then weirdly, it's kind of funny, like the school eventually adopted school uniforms, which were like it wasn't pleasant because it was gendered, right? So I was expected to wear the quote unquote girls uniform, but at the same time it was really relieving because it allowed me to blend in even more, and I didn't have to think or worry about what am I wearing. And I learned how to dress it so that it felt more affirming to me, even though this was all like
Mhm.
subconscious, you know? So I learned to like tweak it, but in a strange way, it was actually very helpful. And then
What?
fortunately and unfortunately, my dad died when I was 14. And
Mhm.
so I moved to Northern Virginia. And luckily, I ended up going to a massive private public school in Northern Virginia that was incredibly, incredibly diverse. And so through there, I was able to start kind of unlearning all of
Mhm.
these things.
So all of that, like you being called those names and being picked on, that all happened middle school and under.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, during that age or during that time period, at what point in your young life did you begin to recognize, okay, I'm just a little bit different than everybody around me, or I'm different than what the culture is telling me that I'm supposed to
Yeah.
be? Do you remember? Were you aware of that when
Yeah.
you were younger?
It's funny you say that. So I think like for me, my gender and my sexuality were two parallel journeys. Like they're kind of happening at the same time, but they're both very distinct, at least for me. So when I was little, like kindergarten, things like that, I was very fortunate. Like my mom and my dad, like they just didn't care how I dressed, how I expressed myself. I'd run up to my mom and be like, "Hey, my name is Max," and I'd be Max for 6 weeks, and then I'd be like, "Okay, like you can call me my birth name again." And my mom was just like, "All right, like I don't know what's going on. I just have a funny kid, like cool, whatever, you know." And she let me play shirtless football with boys, and I had Power Rangers, and she just did not, there was no expectations. She just let me be me. And now as an adult who works with queer youth, I'm like, I see now what a gift and very, very rare that is, right?
Yeah.
And so that didn't change until other people would kind of make comments to my mom and be like, "Hey, is that your daughter? Your kid shouldn't be shirtless playing football. Like that's inappropriate." Or I would be invited to all boys sleepovers, and I learned later like my mom would like call the other parents, so they'd kind of come up with a plan because it wasn't seen as appropriate, and so I could go but then I'd get picked up. So it was like little things that were like in my mind, I didn't have a gender. I was just me, but I was kind of being pushed and pulled by strangers of how I should be. And so then I think once I moved to Jackson and the bullying from actually teachers really increased, then I learned like that part of me, like that non-binary, agender type of person kind of went away and just went dormant until I could handle it and self-accept. And then I would say like my sexuality, like I just use the term gay. I noticed that around like sixth grade, early middle school. Like my best friend, I had a massive crush on her. And I remember like so vividly, we were like walking home from school one day and she was up ahead of me. And all I wanted to do, like it was a beautiful summer day. All I wanted to do was like go up and hold her hand, like just so innocently. Cause I just had this like a crush on this really cool girl. And I just remember vividly, like, felt like someone poured ice water down my back. I was like, that is not allowed. Like, you cannot do that because I don't know. Like I didn't know what would happen, but I knew something bad would happen. And I think like subconsciously, I really thought like, oh, I'm going to go to hell and I'm a bad person and I'm deviant and all of that. Because that's the culture I grew up in. So I think that was just yeah, that was my experience in Jackson.
I that is a shared experience with so many people, and it's just so I don't care how people, wrap it up in a nice little bow or try to or pretty it up or whatever. It's just so harmful for kids.
Yeah.
When those things just get internalized, those like formative years, and you're told this and you're told that, and then thankfully you had parents that, like you said, let you be you. And I mean, that your home had to be like a safe haven for you. Like you could just go home and just be, after a day of
Yeah.
school.
Yeah. I mean, I would say overall, like, it was just kind of this accidental thing. Like, I don't think my mom just didn't care and my dad
Right.
just didn't care. They were just kind of like, why do I like play with what you want to play with, you
Yeah.
know? And that was just kind of it. And I think like as I got older, I started very much trying to look the part of this like white cisgender straight girl. Like I had long hair and I wore makeup, and I look back at pictures, I'm like, my God, that's like my version of drag. Like what are we doing here, you know? Just so wrong. And I think my mom knew that wasn't it,
Yeah.
and she didn't have the language for any of this, you
Right.
know, and she's kind of gone on her journey. Like I think when I came out as gay at 18, and she wasn't like not supportive. I think she was scared. Like she was scared that I wouldn't find community, that I would struggle, that I wouldn't find love and all of that. And then when I came out as non-binary, she was like, I love you. I have no clue what that means. Like,
Hmm.
don't know what is going on. Like, give me a article in a book. But there I was met with immediate love and acceptance, which again is so rare. So like my mom has definitely tried, and she always tries to learn and unlearn her
Hmm.
things,
Which
which
is
is
awesome.
absolutely a gift, which is a gift. Yeah,
Yeah, that's an
absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. You're 100% correct. So it took your family moving to a completely different location for you to be able to begin to unpack or
Yeah.
even start the process
Yeah.
of unpacking, of unlearning.
Yeah, it's actually funny you say that. So like I moved to Northern Virginia August, and I started dating my first girlfriend within a month. Like it like I just met this girl and it just clicked. And I mean, to me, we were having a secret affair that no one knew about. And we would like write each other love letters, and yeah, of course it was all like everyone knew but no one knew, you know.
Hmm.
So we dated for about a year, and then because it's a journey, right? So I thought at the time, I didn't even I if someone asked me how I identified, I would not even know what to
Hmm.
tell you. Because again, I think what people miss is that journey of self-acceptance,
Hmm.
right? And I had no idea how to self-accept my sexuality, let alone my gender, right? So I remember the first time, not the first time, I was at my first girlfriend's apartment. It was maybe 16. And I remember vividly trying to think of the word that I was. And I was like, okay, I think let's go with bi. Maybe I'm bi. I can do bi, because I think in my mind, I was like, I still have privilege, right? I'm not totally gay. There's still something I can hold on to and I'm safe, quote unquote, right? But then like the thought popped in my head. I was like, I'm trans. And I was like, I cannot be trans. Like that is not allowed. That is too big. And I was absolutely terrified of what that meant. And I couldn't even go there. And so that part just shut down. And then slowly over some wild relationships, high school was wild. Girls are wild, you know, just weird things. I slowly was able to figure out like, okay, I'm gay. And that happened a month into college, where again, I was like away from my mom, away from home, all of that. And then I think I was able to accept that,
Mm.
the sexuality. And then when I met my wife, then she helped create a space where I was like, okay, cool, I'm non-binary, and that Max has always been there. I just needed to find them.
So what was that process like? I don't mean for you to, not even the process, but uh having the space to like deal with the how you identify, and then being able to land on non-binary. Uh Having never walked those shoes,
Yeah.
um I'm just from the outside looking in thinking that must have been incredibly relieving, like to be like, oh, there it is. It's this thing here. And
Yeah.
I can hold it and I can put my arms around it. And that's exactly what I feel like. And that solves, not everything, but puzzle pieces start coming together, maybe.
Yeah. No, I think for me, there's two big things that kind of happened at once. One, I got my first one of my first favorite jobs, working with queer youth, right? So I led support groups for dominantly like high school, middle school aged group. And one of those groups was trans specific, right? So I think spending time with trans youth and hearing their stories and hearing their experiences, I would like leave group like, wait a minute. Whoa, there's like some commonalities there, which is empowering and dangerous, right? Because I always had to make sure that I wasn't putting myself in their stories, and I was always keeping that boundary. And as things really started to connect, I went to my boss and I was like, I need a break. Like I'm not in the space where I can lead them and facilitate this space without my own stuff. Like I gotta tag out. And they were very, very understanding. And that's the perks of working at a queer organization for the
Yeah.
most part. But it was that part. And then also in one of my grad programs, we were diving into the dominant experience of like trans youth and kind of this, especially around like kindergarten, like that age of like 6, how gender identity is really starting to like come alive. And I was like listening to my professor lecture, and I was like immediately like thinking back to like Max and just that whole experience, and how I literally remember just not having a gender. Like I was just me, right? And in my mind, I was just floating in the middle and could kind of pull from femininity and masculinity and create my own path. And I just was so overwhelmed in this class that I left and called my partner, and I was just sobbing because I was like, I think there's something to this. Like it was really starting to like seep out of my unconscious, and I was starting to just allow myself to explore and be like, hey, what if I don't really connect with my body? Like just especially for me and my chest, I was like, oh God, like this is not it. Like I was really starting to like lean into that. My name wasn't clicking, and the pronouns and all of that. And honestly, for me, it was really my partner. She just was so patient and gracious and just met me with unconditional love and was just like, you're good. Like, I love you. You need to love you. What do you need so that you can start that journey of healing and self-love? And, she just slowly would like, be like, hey, like, do you want to play around with pronouns? And I'd say yes. Then it was names. Then it was not so much clothing or like hair or things like that. But I think it was really just finding what felt like me. And just, I think through her asking questions and then just kind of almost not moving and just giving me space to play and explore. I think through that, I was finally able to say, like, identify as non-binary. My name is DeHaven. I use they, them pronouns. And that was just years of slowly playing and finding home,
Mm-hmm. How long ago was that?
Oh, I'm so bad at time. I mean, also ADHD, so that's a whole other but time does not exist and it's everything. We've been together 7 years.
Okay. So it's been
So
a good minute.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome. So, well, one of the things that you said brought something to mind. A few weeks ago, I'm part of Equality Florida's Parenting with Pride group, and
yeah,
there was a group of us that went to Tallahassee to be part of the the state's PTA lobby days, legislation convention. And one of the things that they were talking about was here in the state of Florida, and then I mentioned this earlier. Uh, I mean, pre podcast interview, um, that the state of Florida is trying to redefine the word gender and the word sex and kind of combine them and make them the same thing. And there was some confusion at the PTA with some of the volunteers that were there, um, with differentiating the two, just thinking that
yeah,
they mean the same thing. And,
yeah.
there was this one woman that raised her hand and said, I've never heard them not used in the same way. And she said,
Mhm.
what's the difference? And you talk about that too, and you're so eloquent about how you explain things. And I know that there are going to be people listening that maybe don't quite have never dealt and dove into this non-binary and trying to figure these things out. So I was wondering if you could walk some of our listeners through that, that may not quite understand, kind of the difference between, okay, you said your gender and your sexuality paralleled each other and were different. What does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So there's like my biological sex, right? Which is like the shell. That's how I think of it, like the little shell that I exist in. I'm sorry, my cat is now like screaming.
I've got
Um,
cats. It's fine.
God bless the tuxedo cat.
Yes.
So there's like this shell or body that I live in, right? So when I popped out of my mom, doctors said, hey, this is a female baby, right? Like it's based off of my chromosomes, my hormones, all of that. Cool. So as I grew up, which I've kind of touched on, I developed my gender identity, right? Which is if you Google gender identity, there's a lot of different definitions because I think it's so abstract. It's hard to have a concrete definition. But the one I like the most is it's how I feel in my heart, mind, and soul. It's
Mm.
how I understand and see and perceive myself, right? And that's different for everyone. We have this language of man and woman typically in our US modern culture, but if you look at how gender is understood across the world and across time, there's many different understandings of what gender is for different people in different cultures, right? Because gender, when we say it's a social construct, that means it's created by the culture and the people of that time, of that moment. So gender changes across time and space. So we have our physical bodies, we have our gender identity, and then we have our sexuality, which for me means I think girls are stupid cute. Always been really fond of them. And so I use the word gay, and I use the word gay instead of like lesbian because I identify as non-binary and gay feels comfy for me. Before I came out as non-binary, I would say I always liked the word gay better. But I would just say like, oh, I guess I'm a lesbian or things like that. Because at the time, I thought my gender identity was a cisgender woman. It is not. Fun fact.
See, now that's a very simple and like boom, there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very well done. And I think part of the, with the state of Florida, not to get into this at all because I want to stay on your topic, but I think that there's so much confusion around those terms
There
that
is. Yeah.
that they're able to uh, redefine them how they want for their identity politics, about
Yeah.
structuring power, maintaining and structuring power around a certain identity or group, because it is just so, like you said, it's just there's a lot of confusion and sometimes it's just hard to nail that down. So I thought you did that very
Yeah.
well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you're you're kind of going through your journey, and your partner has given you the space and the ability to like really ask hard questions and the time to like wrestle through them. And I like the playground, how you just, you said can ask questions and play and stuff. I
Mm.
like that imagery. So you land on this, you land where you are and you're kind of comfortable where you are. And you were talking about that you had begun one of your first favorite jobs was working with queer youth. How did you get to where you are now, working with Active Minds? Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm just curious how you got to that place.
Yeah. So when I worked with queer youth, like we would try to provide like different education for them. And I realized very quickly how few social emotional learning skills or mental health literacy youth had. And I think a lot of that was because at least the youth that I worked with, so many of them were just in survival, right? Like between home and school, they were just constantly in a state of how do I get to the next day? So everyone was kind of in survival mode and then really trying to find ways to build community and different protective factors to help them show up for the next day. One of my favorite middle schoolers, I would meet with him at the end of every group, and he would just sit in my office for a minute. And I'd be like, hey, dude, like, what do you need so that I see your face next week in my office? Right. Like, so that I'm graced with your presence and I see you come through the door. And he's like, this is what I need. I need 5 minutes with you just to like check in. It's like, done. All right. I'll see you next week, man. And like, that's how we just got him through some really, really hard stuff, along with the support of some other brilliant therapists that he was fortunate to work with. But when I knew that it was time to leave working with specifically queer youth, because I think I reached a point in my own journey with my own identities that I was like, I had just done queer work my whole career. And I was like, what does it look like to branch out and enter this world of mental health, right? Especially mental health, not as a clinician, right? Like, what does that look like? And so I was very fortunate to stumble across Active Minds, and Active Minds has been around for 20 years. And its history is all about mental health awareness and starting the conversation. And how do we encourage youth and young adults to be agents of change and mental health advocates, and create change and awareness in their communities to both serve them and others. So I was fortunate with Active Minds because they were looking to develop a middle school program, which is how We Are Active Minds middle school was created. And yeah, I was just fortunate to hook up with Active Minds and be the lead in creating We Are Active Minds, which is a curriculum I'm just super proud of and ridiculously excited about, because I think it's very unique in that it weaves together mental health literacy, SEL, advocacy, like positive youth development. It's all of these different things that I've always seen separate, which always really annoyed me, pros and cons. And I was like, well, how can we weave them all together to hopefully create a really playful, engaging curriculum that youth will look forward to, right? I was like, we can't just read mental health definitions, like they'll never talk to us again. How can we make talking about like crisis and relationships fun and middle school appropriate? So yeah, that's how We Are came about.
That's cool. I listening to you talk, I'm trying to take myself like out of the equation of like,
Yeah,
because we've had conversations, right? So like I know what you're talking about. I'm just thinking about somebody that might be listening, like, what does that mean? W- I think that we're all aware of the pressures that our students are under
yeah,
right now, how much more difficult it is to be a teenager than when I grew up. I mean, 100%.
I can't
Um,
imagine. I don't want to imagine.
yeah, right.
It's brutal,
I'm
brutal.
just thinking about, when I was in middle school, high school, if I had access to social media, oh my Lord. Oh my
Just
gosh.
cry every day. No,
Yeah,
absolutely. I can't handle it as an adult. And yet we expect 10-year-olds to navigate TikTok. And I'm a mess some days looking at it. No, it'll
yeah.
wreck you.
Or the stupid stuff that I would have posted. Um, I'm just so thankful that it's not there, that it wasn't there. I saved myself a lot of cancellation, um, because of the stuff that I said or whatever. But uh, we're all aware of those pressures, and you talk about like mental wellness and mental health and all of those things.
Mhm.
What does that mean specifically? Like when you're working with these kids, or what is it that maybe it's Active Minds, or maybe it's just like your own personal like mission.
Yeah,
What are the things that you really see are the problems that the kids are facing today?
that's such a good question. And honestly, that was a question that really stumped me, because I think mental health is different for everyone, right? But to me, and when I first started out trying to build We Are and working with folks to build We Are, I think to me mental health is my relationship with myself, like the voices in my head, the noise in my head, my internal experience, and how that impacts my external experience, right? And I think I'm and I say that as someone who has anxiety, who has ADHD. I'm also diagnosed OCD, right? So I'm a person who the voices in my head can get very loud, right? Um, and and I think like for me, especially at middle school, right? It's such a horrible moment
It
in
is.
our lives, right? Because developmentally, it's this moment where my brain is both seeking independence and yet is screaming at me to hyper conform. So what do you do with that, right? I'm both younger and I'm like old and I'm young, right? Like anyone who works with middle schoolers will know exactly what I mean. When it To me, middle schoolers, it's like you're working with a 5-year-old and a 60-year-old. Like 1 minute they would be like playing with a bop it, and then the next second these youth are like, let's talk about capitalism and the patriarchy. I'm like, what is going on? Like, how do
Yeah.
you know what that is, right? Like, it's a really fascinating moment. And to me, middle school is like an amazing moment where you can still use the playfulness and the youthfulness of them to talk about really intense things because they can handle it, in an age appropriate way, but like we can talk and I can help you and you're still willing to listen to me, versus by the time you get to like 15, 16, it's kind of like, no, right? Like maybe I'll listen to you, but it's like you got to work a little bit more. And then like 17, 18, I kind of come out of it and I'm like a whole human again. And now we can play and vibe. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Yes.
just, but can I catch you
I do know
in
what you
this
mean.
moment, right? So yeah, I mean, for me, like when I'm like myself and like the team I work with was trying to create We Are, I think all of us were really thinking about the youth that we've worked with, our own journeys, like research, like we were trying to put everything together to think about like what is mental health at middle school, right? And if you look at the curriculum, it's broken down into two parts, and it's self and community. So to me, it was, how do we help them explore themselves, explore their values, their self-esteem, the noise in their head, their feelings, their thoughts? How can we help them with that while also helping them develop hopefully healthier relationships, identify more like toxic friendships that really aren't serving them? How can we help them become game makers in their own
Mm.
communities and see that they do have control? How do we build their self-efficacy, especially in like this year 2024, when there is something horrible happening every 5 minutes, it feels like. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I have felt secure in the world since like Obama was in office, and
Yeah.
even then it was sketchy,
Yeah.
right?
2015, it was like somebody had a couple of matches and then there was a pool of gasoline and it was
Oh,
just like started. And then
just
2016, it took off. Yeah.
just wild. And I say that as someone who's 32, right? I can imagine growing up and this is all you've known, this chaos that we live in. And so for me, like self-efficacy was a huge part of this curriculum, because I want youth to understand that you do have control. You have control over your thoughts, your emotions, your actions. If you can't control anything else, you can at least control that, and start to understand like my decisions have consequences and I can do this and that serves my friends and that helps me, right? Like, so to me, mental health is, I don't know, it's our existence, man. Like it's everything. It's just
Yeah.
all this massive, messy blob.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm thinking about, my daughter, she kind of missed, well, she was a little bit older. She graduated in 2020 and, she missed half of her senior year. And it's not the end of the world, but it was still, she missed a bunch of that stuff and it was like really, and she turned 18 during that time and
Yeah.
it was sad and we gave her space to mourn, but my son is 5 years younger. And so, it was his third grade that got interrupted and his life has never been air quote normal
Right.
since.
Right.
Um, and then I'm thinking, um, okay, if my son who has, you know, two parents that love and support him, and we're going to do everything that we possibly can to get him the help and resources that he needs, even when it's a pain in the butt, and you got to go through the system because the system sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm thinking about all of those kids that are out there that may not have that or may not have that and are dealing with um, figuring out, like you, okay, where do I fit in all this?
Yep.
I feel different, or I'm attracted differently, or
Yep.
I'm supposed to be acting this way. I'm supposed to be playing football, but I want to go over here and play with this stuff, and or vice versa. And just, I think in the best of times that's difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the best of times.
Yeah.
And
And then with that, right, like you have all of the policy stuff happening and this like visceral attack happening for queer youth, but specifically trans youth. And it is just like, I can't imagine. I mean, as an adult, I look at the headlines and just think, good Lord, like, I mean, there's literally no words, right? And I mean, I've been to those school board meetings where I've witnessed adults literally, like, I mean, I can't even say, like, just literally promote like violence towards a child just because that child is trans. And it's like, you are an adult threatening a kid in a public setting and we're upset about how this kid identifies. You like, we need to take 20 steps back. Like, what? It's wild. It's wild.
Yeah.
And then it's like you have children listening to this and is sitting in this anxiety and this hostility and this tension. It's not okay, And I'm a firm believer in trying to help youth be youth, right? Like, it really, and this could be because, like, I'm neurodivergent. I really don't like it when we ask a 10-year-old to act like they're 35. You know what I mean? It's like, let the kid be the kid, right? And so I think that was one big reason that the We Are curriculum is very playful, right? Like, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of games, there's a lot of weird activities, because it's trying to just let youth be their age, right? And I also think it's important for, like, older youth, young adults and adults to, like, go back to that kid-like vibe, because, like, a really good friend of mine, she said something that just blew me away. She's like, we're every age we've ever been. And that has just stuck with me. I think about it almost every single day, and it's like, that 10-year-old is still in you. It's just whether or not you allow yourself access to that 10-year-old, right?
Hmm.
So
I never heard that before.
right, there's
That's
something like, dang.
Yeah, that's a really huge sentence packed into a few words.
Yep.
Like
It's like
it kind
that
of
16-year-old is still in there. It's
yeah,
just what you let that 16-year-old out. And why don't you? Like, sometimes, yeah, like, let's take care of our adult stuff, but then also, like, maybe let's go do something ridiculous that you would only do when you're, like, 22. Like, drive 3 hours to get ice cream somewhere just because, like, why not? Right? Like,
yeah.
but as an adult, it's
Hmm.
like, well, it's like too late, or, we rationalize everything. And it's like, let's just do
Too
something that
late.
makes no sense.
Too late. That might be the one. Too late. I'm supposed to be in bed
Too
right
late. It's
now.
bedtime. It's
Yeah,
8 o'clock.
yeah. But I will say you brought it up. You were talking about, the kids and legislation, let kids be kids and stuff. And I mentioned it right at the very beginning of the podcast that we're like our little faith community here in Gainesville, we're implementing the We Are Minds curriculum for our students because there's just so much value in it that we felt like, why are we just going to give these kids, why would we give them anything else? If we're trying to help prepare them for adulthood and we want to partner with parents in doing that, not just spiritually, but also like physically and mentally and all of these other things, why wouldn't we do this? And one of the beautiful things I thought, like reading through the sample stuff that you all sent us, was how um was how and maybe this isn't the right word, but inclusive it is,
Yeah.
of where regardless of where you are. So my son is straight and cisgendered and white, and then I'm not going to name anybody else, but then you've got over here and you've got like, a person that's they might be trans, they're not quite sure yet, a person of color, and
Mhm.
but the experience, like, it just it does such a wonderful job of including
Mm.
everybody in that. So it's like it's not just, you know, queer specific, because my son's not, but he's going to get a ton out of this. And it's not geared towards just straight kids, because everything is geared towards straight kids. It just does a
Yeah.
excellent job. I'm I'm assuming that was done on purpose.
It was, and it means a lot that you
Yeah.
noticed it. I think the word I've really started, or phrase I've really started using, is community responsive,
Mm,
right? Um, I'm a firm believer. I've been in those spaces where I've seen the power of Black youth coming together and being in community, and them just able to say something and five of them just look and they know exactly what they mean, right? Like, there's so much power in that shared experience, right? And there's power in having a diverse group learn from one another and building empathy and being able to talk about our differences in a healthy, respectful, calm way, right? So there's power in both. So I think when we originally started the coming up with We Are, I was like, okay, how do we create a curriculum that will serve all of these identities that exist, right? And like, yes, my wheelhouse is queer youth, right?
Mhm.
My wheel, like I cannot speak to the experiences of Muslim communities,
Right.
BIPOC communities. Like I have my lived identity and my knowledge, and I pull and try to learn as much as I can, but there's only so much, right? And we we were so fortunate to team and partner with so many brilliant minds, and we're able to, I think, create a curriculum that can blend and become a chameleon to the identity specific folks that are in that space, and that conversations around race, religion, sexuality, gender will just kind of naturally come up, because again, that's their mental health, right? Like that's what's impacting them. And so I think the prompts and the games and the questions will just kind of naturally bring that about in a way that is hopefully healing and affirming for folks, but isn't having us write 20,000
Mhm.
different curriculums that are like, okay, this is specific for Black youth, for brown youth. It is just like, okay, but what if we can, there's absolute pros to that. And also, can we create just this community responsive one? And I think I'm super excited to see it, especially in like the hands of someone like you who's so knowledgeable and passionate and skilled. Yeah, I think it will be brilliant.
I
I'm
do
super
too.
excited.
Um, and you, for me, I will tell you, because we do a lot of work with our local queer community, so our kids are around it all the time. But um, for me, I think the thing that really stuck out to me and really called to me was that idea of empathy, of
Mm,
creating that internally, but and then uh, not just internally, but then like how that plays out. Because you talk about self and community, and where empathy is in short supply these days.
yep.
In the highest of offices in our nation, just empathy is just not, it's just not a thing. And even down to here, like I talked to you all earlier during the training of like in social media where these certain people, like a Ben Shapiro or Matt Walsh or Jordan Peterson, and I've said it before, I said it to you this morning, but uh, they are what? No, I'm not going to say it out loud because I don't want to alienate anybody. All right. Yeah. If you really want to know what I think, just message me and I'll tell you. But so this stuff comes up, right? And it's just so unempathetic. And it's just, number one, it's just elementary basement level pseudo psychology, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but it translates into, adolescents and youth and teenagers, and it becomes very harmful because
Yeah.
while you and I might be able to sit and have a nuanced conversation where ideas that maybe we don't necessarily agree with are talked about during that conversation, um, these things that our kids are absorbing, number one, don't come across that way, and they're not taken that way, and then they're definitely not regurgitated that way. And
Hmm.
like I know, in just our little community, one of the things that prompted us when I saw this to, I talked to our parents. One of the things that prompted us was that there's a little one of the teen boys has a friend who is just horribly homophobic,
Mm.
and coming, and it's literally because of what he hears at home. He's young enough to like not really have been able to form his own opinions yet on most things. He's still just being informed, and it's just like, but I'm not going to repeat what he said, but what he said was so horrible that it was just like, how do we teach our kids
Yeah.
empathy? How do we teach our kids, critical thinking and how to respond in a thoughtful way to those things instead of just, again, getting mad and like all of a sudden it turns into a fist fight.
Right.
But that was one of the things to me that was just like, oh, this is
Yeah.
literally a godsend. This is a lifeboat right here.
Yeah. And it's like what breaks my heart with that kid, right, who said the homophobic statement, it's like, to me, it's like, what are you experiencing at home?
That's it.
Right? Like what, and not even that, like what limits are being put on you? What boxes are you being put in at such a young age? And you don't even realize it, right? Like you're just existing. It could be so small as like, I don't even, I love the color pink, right? I think it's an overlooked color. And it's like, maybe you love the pink too, and you grab it, but your parent is like,
Mm.
no, like that's incorrect. And like, bats you down. It's like, oh, cool. Like I'm going to go back in my box, right? Like it can be so small as that, or so much larger as like how you see yourself. If you experience like love and sexual desire, like who are those feelings, or what bodies are those attractions towards, like, but either way, it's like by you shutting down someone else, you're also shutting down yourself, because you're feeding into this system of there's a right and a wrong way to exist and navigate the world. And that dominant thought is so, the older I get, it's so narrow and small and limiting. And it's like, yeah, I guess like hopefully like through we are and the conversations, it's just learning that there's so many different ways to exist on this planet. And it's like, as long as you're not harming yourself, harming others, like live your truth, man. Like, but don't, out of fear or whatever it is, like don't stifle others and harm others just because you don't know how to sit with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I
Like
do.
just take a deep breath. We have some great lessons on coping skills. Like, let's just let's pause, yeah, I don't know. I really hope, especially, and I think it's crucial for youth who identify as especially white, cisgender, heterosexual, to understand the box that you're being put in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so much of life can happen without you really making these conscious decisions, and you're just kind of going with the flow. And then you look up and you're like, wait, this is not what I want. This is not who I am. What am I doing? Right? It's like, instead, let's develop these skills to live your truth, right? To really step into yourself in a way that's empowering for you and embraces different lenses, you know what I mean? And you don't have to agree with it, you don't have to love it, but you can also meet it with some baseline dignity and respect, like, I mean, I've met some people who, through like doing LGBTQ trainings, I know they do not like me, they do not want me in their communities. Like, some have viscerally told me like I would cause you harm, right? Even then, I'm looking at them and I'm like, you are still a human being, and I'm going to meet you with some baseline respect, right? Like, and hopefully by me doing that, you can also remember that I am a human. Even if you think I've made up everything, right? Like, I've had people be like, non-binary doesn't exist. And I'm like, bro, I am standing in front of you. Like, this is gaslighting to them. Like, what is going on? And it's like, you do not have to get it. You do not have to like it, but you can meet it with basic human dignity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you can look at me and be like, I don't get it. I don't like it. Go away with your flags. Cool. I'm going to go in my corner. You go in your corner. And we don't have to, it doesn't have to be this visceral, hostile fight. And to me, all that's happening is, one, it's just perpetuating incredible harm. And then I look at the rates of mental health among not even queer youth, but all youth. And it's like, the kids are not all right. And then you look at the greater culture and it's like, bro, it's all connected,
Mm-hmm.
like we got to step up and do something to help youth, because they need it. They shouldn't, a 12-year-old should not have to be navigating all of this, right? But hopefully, like, one of my favorite lessons in the whole curriculum is reframe, which very much pulls from like cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, to just think about like, what are my thoughts? How do my thoughts impact my emotions and impact my actions? And how can I learn to change that pattern and change that cycle and hopefully take more control over my life, Um, especially if you live in a community that is really hostile, right? It's like, how can I
Mm-hmm.
live in my truth and navigate my anxieties and my fears?
Yeah, I hear all of that. And as you were talking through that, I was just thinking about us and, our journey and coming out of very conservative fundamentalist evangelicalism and the things that we're taught and the things that honestly we believed for the longest time. And just when we for us it was like it was a real theological shift for us. um but when we did that, one of the things that I can look back on now, having been years later,
Mm.
is just like you, because what you said, it really resonated. You're talking about like such a narrow and small box. You use words like that, and just how big and beautiful our world got
Yeah.
when
Hmm.
when we began to meet people with, like you said, just that empathy, and then really hearing stories and not just being like, okay, well, this guy over here on this stage said this, so I have to think this way, but then like allowing life experience and allowing like people that we knew and relationships begin to inform what we thought and what we believed. And like for me, I really hope that, for again, from my viewpoint of being straight and white and heterosexual and all those things, I really hope that those kids that take this begin to see that how big and beautiful and diverse the world really is, and how that makes things so much better,
Yep.
like just personally. I mean,
Yep.
not even culturally or on a societal level, not this 30. I'm talking about like right on the ground where you're at in your neighborhood. It just makes life better, that I know that, I've got this person over here that I love and loves me, and they're over here in this part, and I'm just like, I never would have even known about this stuff over here,
Right.
and now I
Yep.
get to be a part of it. And it's just I know
It's
that
finding
maybe,
community.
yeah,
Like it's finding so many different ways to live, and like seeing how different cultures work, different identities, community. It's like, oh wow, like I see the superpower of this community here. Like, how can I bring that into my own life in a respectful way that honors culture and isn't
right.
appropriating, right? But it's like, oh, like, so I mean, my experience of being a white middle to upper class person is this highly individualistic, competitive,
Hmm.
me type vibe. And it's like, well, wait, like, yes, okay, I need to take care of myself, cool. But what about family? What about community? How do I truly connect with others? And instead of worrying about my journey, how can I like look at these like the amazing I would say dominantly like Black women that I've had the privilege to learn and work with and be friends with, and see like this deep community and connection and this uplifting of others. It's like, wow, like how can I learn from that to unlearn the story of whiteness and uplift others in a truly communal, familial sense? You know what I mean? Like it's
Hmm.
just, and it's not, and I feel like some folks could hear all this and be like, oh, you're asking me to swap out or lose who I am. It's like, it's not about that. Like that's, there's
It's
enough for
both
everyone.
and.
It's
Yeah.
just expanding. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's like instead of
Addition.
looking at just this one part of the planet, you're stepping back to see the whole universe. You know what I mean? And to
Yeah.
me, that's what true like social justice, DEI, whatever words you want to use, and mental health, it's all related to just see the vastness of humanity and how we're all connected to it. So let's just, I don't know, let's learn and help each other out, man.
Yeah, that is one of my biggest hopes for our students that are going to be going through this, is that it gives them the tools to see that, opens doors that they didn't know were there, or opens their eyes, or however you want to put it, but just being able to see themselves in that way and give themselves permission, but then to pass that along to like,
Yeah,
you know, okay, well, if I'm doing that for me, then they need to do that for them, and just
right.
being able to have the tools to do that. That's my biggest hope for specifically, our kids,
Yeah.
um,
Because
and
it's a
knowing where
ripple
they're at.
effect.
Yes.
Like it's all a ripple effect. I mean, even something so simple as like another lesson I really enjoy called My Bubble. It's all about boundaries. But it's like, how do you, what are boundaries? Like, my God, what a really difficult concept. And uh, and then how do you apply that? But we were like, we came up with like a fun game and handout to just simply state like, what do you need to be your full self in a moment? And that's going to change across time, spaces, who you're with. But one thing I do hope is that, like, I envision, like, a 13-year-old going home, and instead of maybe this escalating fight, it's just like, hey, you said this, it made me feel sad, can you please not say it in that way anymore, right? And it's like, maybe the parent has never thought of boundaries in that way, and it's like, you're hopefully, like, you're learning, it can create this ripple effect in families and communities to just start swapping and changing some different habits, you know what I mean? Because we don't know
Yeah.
what we don't know. I didn't learn this crap in middle school, right? Like, I was
No.
watching SpongeBob and eating cereal. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know what's
No.
going on.
No, we didn't talk about this. No. Well, hey, I want to honor your time, but I want to finish with one question.
Yeah.
Because I know you got stuff to do. You're a busy person. Um, with all the stuff that we just talked about, right? It's a heavy season. Like you said, it feels like the world's been on fire. It's still on fire, and all the stuff that everybody has to deal with. What gives you joy? What brings you hope in the middle of this season that we're in?
Honestly, I would say people like you, people that are just plucking on and just trying to find any way to spark joy, find community, and help folks. It will never cease to amaze me that no matter the lies that social media promote of how negative and disconnected everyone is, to meet someone in reality, not on TikTok, that is
Mm,
just really trying to help folks, right? There's no agenda. It's just, how do I catch the folks in my community and try to do some good? And to me, that plus just being around youth, being around queer youth will always be the thing that makes my heart sing. They're brilliant, they're fearless, they're legends, and they don't know it. But hopefully through things like we are, they start to see how legendary they are.
I love that. They are legends, aren't they?
They're cool, man.
Yeah.
There's something to them. Just there's an X factor.
Yeah. The students that we get to work with at our Pride student meetups, they're all rock stars, and very few of them know it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I get that completely. DeHaven, thank you so much. That was such an awesome conversation. If people are wanting to find you or find We Are Minds to learn more about this, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, if you just go to
Or We
like,
Are Active, sorry, Active Minds. What did I
oh,
say?
you're good. Yeah. So if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
just Google Active Minds, you should easily find our website. You can also reach out to me at DeHaven at activeminds.org. And yeah,
Okay.
happy to
Okay.
happy to chat. Please chat.
Yeah, those that'll be in the show notes. And one thing that we didn't really touch on is just how easy this program is. You don't have to have like a degree in anything. You don't have to have, I mean, you do an onboard training. I did that this morning. It was very interactive. The time flew by. It wasn't overwhelming in any sort of way. So if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh, I'm super interested in that, but I don't think I'm qualified," you are. If you're listening to this, you're qualified. You can do this. It's the way they set it up was very easy. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that before we got off here and they're like, "Oh, this sounds great, but there's no way I could pull this off." If
Yeah.
you're part of an organization or your school or church or a Pride Community Center or another non-for-profit, reach out to DeHaven, find that because yeah.
And it's free, totally free. And in fact, will actually pay you to implement it with your youth, right? So
Oh, that's
it's
a
the whole journey is free. And in fact, you can put at least a little bit of money in your pocket to hopefully do some cool stuff for your community.
yeah, that's a really key point. I'm glad you said
I
that
always
because
overlook that part, but that's
yeah,
an
yeah.
important
No, no, no.
thing.
It's free. And I will tell you this. I was shocked at how good it is. And then being like, wait, this is free? Like you're giving this to us? So yeah, it's not just, most of the time they're like, you get what you pay for. This is definitely not one of those times. This is like, it's really, really good stuff. So thank you again for coming on here, sharing your story, and then kind of like talking about Active Minds and what it's doing.
Yeah, no, thank you. This has been awesome. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So everybody check those show notes, click those links. If you're interested, I cannot encourage parents highly enough to get involved with this. At least get on there and find out more information and then take it. Maybe you can't do it, but you could take it to somebody that can. So yeah, click the show notes, go find them. Thanks for following along, you guys. That was another awesome conversation with DeHaven and Active Minds. Thanks for following along. You all get out of here. Go love on some people.